Kannst du atmen lassen noch?
Ich hab keine Ahnung, was das ist. Wahrscheinlich, weil es gewaschen ist. Genau. Ist das da? Ja. Nee, da ist es nicht. Das steht da.
Ich heiße Elle, ich bin 20 Jahre alt, ich komme aus England, ich wohne in Zehlendorf in Berlin. I applied to a couple of universities in America before I decided to come to Berlin, and I didn't get in there. So I thought back about where I really loved in Europe and where else was an option. And I'd visited Berlin in the summer, so obviously had the beautiful weather. And I really loved the history of the city and the nightlife. I'd been out a couple of times in Berlin and loved it. And I thought I'd apply here. So yeah, I chose this for my Erasmus. One of the biggest differences I've noticed between Berlin and England, or Germany and England, is the student living situation. So in England, the main part of your university experience, or a big part of it, is that you spend a lot of time in your flat with your flatmates. They're usually your first and longest serving friends. You have movie nights, cooking together, you go out together. Whereas here, the student flat is kind of just a base. I don't really spend much time here, apart from when I'm like sleeping or working. I go to other friends' houses to hang out or just to see other people. And although my flatmates are really nice and we kind of get on a chit-chat level, we're not that close. I don't actually even know their last names. So unfortunately, I'm still speaking English every day, all day. I was hoping to learn German and be fluent, but that's not going to happen. I'm still going out a lot with friends, so to dinners, cocktails. My love of cocktails has remained, although the bank balance is slowly draining. And yeah, I just love like spending time with my friends that I've made here, who again, unfortunately, are mostly English, but I'll work on that next term. The things that I've changed, so just kind of a natural change, was the amount of time that I spend on public transport. So being so far out, I'm on there for like 2 hours a day probably, like minimum, and that's just like going to uni and maybe going into town to see people. But that's like not all bad, you get used to it, and gives me time to listen to the podcasts and widen my knowledge about life. But yeah, so probably those are the big changes and the things I'm still doing. I'd say the biggest part of my identity is probably my hair, just because it's been made a part of my identity from when I was younger. So when I reached about 12 years old, people at school would kind of point it out, and it was nothing that I'd noticed before. People used to say how nice my hair was when I was at the hairdressers, and then when I went to secondary school, it would be pointed at in the playground, kind of ridiculed a bit, and that's fine, like it's not a sob story. I sort of turned it around and made it a part of me and a part of my humour, so it made me quite quick-witted, banterous, sarcastic, because you had to get used to kind of retorting to these silly hair insults. So yeah, again, humour is a big part of my identity, linked to my hair, and also being a woman, which I've recently sort of discovered as part of my identity since being here and kind of widening my knowledge about feminism and ways that you can be feminist and ways that you're not feminist, and how you can change that with different podcasts like The Guilty Feminist, it's a good one, and also probably the last thing of my identity, just because I think it's something that people notice, is my dungarees. I wear them a lot.